Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. We'll wait just a little bit longer for more people to join, and then we'll get started. All right. Wait just a couple more seconds for everyone to join. Thanks again for making us part of your day. All right, let's get going. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Field Nation's webinar, Booming Demand, Scarce Talent, Navigating the Skilled Cabling Labor Crisis. I would like to first introduce our panelists. So we have Wael Mohammed. He's our EVP of Strategy at Field Nation. Wael has been in the IT services industry for more than 27 years. His background is in strategy and data analytics. Next, I'd like to introduce our Field Nation customer, LMI Tech Systems. So they have been on Field Nation since 2012. We consider them one of our most strategic partners. They're a top full-service electrical contractor and system integrator in Georgia and have earned national recognition for multi-site deployments and integrations for electrical, telecommunications, and electronic safety and security projects. LMI can really handle just anything that their clients envision. So from LMI, we have Thomas Edmondson, their VP of Operations, and in their professional services group. He's been with LMI since 2006. He started as a project manager in the field, and now he manages a very large team of project managers and project support personnel. He has over 25 years of experience in the low voltage industry, specializing in infrastructure cabling. And last but not least, we have Michael Jolick with us today as well, also from LMI Tech Systems. Michael is their national account manager and has over 10 years of experience managing field services for large national IT deployments. So thanks to all of our panelists and also to all of our registrants. Thanks for joining us today. Quick reminder that we do have a Q&A panel in Zoom. If you have any questions at all during the webinar, if we don't answer live, we'll do our best to follow up with you. So we have a lot of great things to talk about. So let's get right to the agenda. Today, we're going to cover cabling market demand and all the various factors that are creating tons of opportunity in this space. The labor crisis for skilled cabling techs, as well as something that we'll cover, and the insights on the workforce that supports all of this cabling infrastructure work. And then we'll get to some business recommendations and let you know, with all this booming demand, how can you implement strategies to take full advantage of this market? And then last but not least, we'll tie this up with a live Q&A with our panelists from Field Nation as well as LMI Tech Systems. And before I hand this off to our panelists, we do have one poll for you today. So the question is, what types of cabling projects have brought your business the biggest growth opportunities? So this is an open-ended question, so we won't be analyzing all the results live today, but we will share those themes with you after the webinar. So thanks in advance for your response. And with that, we'll leave this poll running for just a couple of minutes, and I will hand this off to Wael Mohammed. Wael?
Thank you, Sarah. My pleasure being with everyone here, and thank you so much for joining us. For those of you who are not very familiar with Field Nation, we are the leading marketplace for connecting skilled talent in the fields of market segments of on-site technology services with businesses and service providers. We run over or close to 1.5 million jobs a year. And by the virtue of that data, we get to a point where we get so close to mimicking the bigger field services environment and the bigger market, and we get very interesting perspective into the data. And one of the things that have been very exciting for us is to see the transformation that happened in field services over the last 18 to 36 months, especially in the wake of COVID, from where there was a lot of work that happened on equipment installations and rollouts to a little bit of shift more towards the network infrastructure work. The field services have witnessed a lot of network infrastructure work over the last 18 months. So we're here today to try to break that down for you, give you more of the insights that we see in the market about what exactly happened, what are some of the key drivers that drive that growth, what are some of the segments that are hot and will continue to be hot, and how to plan for riding these waves moving forward. So with this, I want to move to the next slide where we're going to be talking about basically two areas, two technologies that are still reigning supreme when it comes to cabling in general, fiber and copper. I know everyone is very fond of talking about fiber as the fast growth segment. That's for sure, as a segment or as a technology is very fast growing. But we're going to talk a little bit more about why also copper is here to stay. But some growth drivers, particularly when it comes to fiber, include warehouses and large distribution centers. With the growth of e-commerce and the push towards omni-channel work that retail is, or the strategy that retail is pushing towards, there is massive proliferation of the number of of distribution centers and logistics centers across the nation. And these are large area buildings where copper falls short. So they require very long runs, longer than 300 feet, if I'm not mistaken. Our experts here can correct me, and these typically require fiber. So fiber is a huge candidate for these large distribution centers and warehouses, and there have been a lot of growth of them recently, and this has been a big driver for fiber. Same thing with data centers. New data centers being built, with whether these are hyperscale data centers or mid-sized data centers or even small data centers. We're going to talk particularly about data centers and why they're growing, but this is another major driver for fiber. A third driver for fiber is that the technology itself is becoming a little bit more cost-effective, not extremely cost-effective immediately, so you still need to allocate budget for that. But the good news is that it's very durable. So if you are putting some capital investment into it, this capital investment is going to provide you with ROI over a longer term. So we're seeing that those that can afford allocating budget upfront are opting for fiber. Especially if they have the budget for it, and because over a longer term it's more cost effective, it's more durable. And also the work from home wave that happened during COVID really brought the need to put extra bandwidth at homes, and this also made fiber to the home another major driver for the growth of fiber. On the other hand, copper is still reigning supreme, and it's not giving up market share, and that's because the technology in and of itself is also improving a lot. And two of the major drivers of the improvement of technology is the ability of fiber to transmit bigger bandwidth in the 10 gigabit the networking technology, especially with the upper copper, the Cat6As and above. The power over Ethernet, and what this is bringing also from huge wiring footprint saving for the networking infrastructure and industry in general. And it's also budget friendly. But what's really also driving the growth of it is the massive proliferation of consumer digitalization that is happening, particularly in retail, the new store openings and remodels that have been happening recently. Over the last 3 to 4 years, especially in the wake of COVID, there was some drought when it comes to new store openings and remodels. This drought is fading away. This last year, we've been witnessing a lot more growth of new store openings and remodels, and we'll talk specifically about this in a couple of minutes. But before doing this, let's take a look at how structured cabling in general is growing. The US market for structured cabling right now is being assessed at somewhere around $2.5 to $3 billion, but this is going to continue growing at a pace of between 7 to 10% compound annual growth rate to make it all the way to like $7 to $10 billion all the way through 2030. So structured cabling is here to stay. It's going to even grow further because of all the reasons that we're going to share shortly. Copper is still reigning supreme because it's very cost effective, but not only that, it's getting a lot better, the copper technology. And the growth with fiber that we're seeing is happening very fast, especially in data centers. So talking a little bit about some of the drivers that drive the growth for cabling in general, One of the major drivers that we've been seeing in the market recently is the new wave of new store openings and remodels. And so over the last 2 to 3 years, and in the next slide, over the last 2 to 3 years, as I mentioned, there was a little bit of a drought when it comes to retail. Retail has not opened a lot of stores or done massive amount of remodels during COVID, but right after COVID, retail had in their hands a lot of money to spend, thanks to the $2.3 trillion of stimuli packages that the government put in the hands of the American consumer. Consumers really went for a shopping spree. And what happened is that retail had a lot of money to spend, and that really retail spent it very well. They put a lot of money on remodels and also now new store openings. So some research institutions like Core Research are seeing planned number of store openings in the excess of 4,000 are planned and announced. If you are talking about the non-announced yet, the list could go all the way up to 10,000. And that opens up a market for over $1 billion of work in cabling and in other key activities that we're going to talk about shortly, but particularly cabling, wiring gear is so important. So these 4,000 plus new store openings that are announced open up the opportunity for over 100 million square foot of new store openings and remodels. One important data input piece, or two actually. The first is NRF. Even though there is a lot of news from economists about potential recession, NRF still in Q1 announced a forecast of retail expectation to grow anywhere between 3 to 4% this year. Definitely that's lower than the 7% that retail ended with in the end of 2022, and way lower than the terrific double digit that was back in 2021 retail sales. But still 3 to 4%, given everything that we're seeing in the market, given some of the slowdowns that are happening because of the Fed hiking some of the rates that are increasing the cost of capital and making borrowing more challenging. The 3 to 4% is still promising, and especially if you combine it with another data point, which is that even during recessionary periods, some retail segments still thrive. We've been seeing this at our end from a data perspective during COVID, and we even expect that during a recession scenario that some retail segments will still thrive, particularly quick serve restaurants, discount, pharmacy, convenience, and grocery. These 5 retail segments really continue to thrive, whether it is during pandemic or recession, they continue to thrive. So you're going to see a lot of work in discount stores and even other stores that are showing as or masquerading as if they are discount stores, even though they're not like exactly discount stores, but they are masquerading as low cost leaders. These will thrive during a recessionary scenario. So we don't want to paint a picture that is only discount segment that is doing this work or new store openings. So in the next slide, again, data courtesy of our friends at Core Research. There is still a lot of activity happening from so many different retailers across the spectrum, but we want you to focus on these 5 segments during any recessionary scenario: the discount, QSRs, quick serve restaurants. The spend into quick serve restaurants never go away. Grocery, pharmacy, and convenience. These 5 segments continue to thrive even during any recessionary scenario. So these 5 segments, the interesting news about them is that they in and of themselves have over 600,000 to, in some estimates, close to 1 million sites when it comes to retail. Why do we talk too much about retail? Well, it is based on our perspective and based on the data that we see in the market and the research that we do. Retail holds close to 70% of the activity in field services general. Whether that has to do with the break fix work that happens in the market or even the rollouts of the projects, retail has a massive penetration into the field services segment because of its massive footprint, a lot of footprint there. So what are some of the major projects that we see when it comes to cabling that we've been seeing over the last 18 months and we think will continue to thrive? First, there continues to be a need to really bring in a lot of wireless power into the different building types, whether these are retail stores, big box retail, large logistics facilities. They need wireless access points because the massive proliferation of devices that you're seeing there, the IoT, the sensors, everything hinges on wireless access points. Interestingly, as many seasoned cablers said before us, wireless requires a lot of wiring. So these wireless access points, especially with the upgrade to Wi-Fi 6, really need a lot of work on refreshing for Cat 6A. And we see a lot of work happening on WAPs or wireless access points across all the types of buildings or facilities or locations. For retail, there is a rise of upgrades for point of sale equipment that is also requiring cabling and self-checkouts for sure. And also the sensors and RFID security in retail, especially RFID security. Security is big, and we're going to talk in detail about it, but you might be seeing some retailers actually announcing news that they've been, in some cases, talking about losses that happen because of inventory shrinkage. So loss prevention strategies in retail are a big topic today. And these require a lot of installations of IP cameras and surveillance, and this goes with a lot of cabling. And definitely take cabling for kiosks, which is exactly aligning with the consumer digitalization and aligning the consumer experience from the home and from e-commerce to the store, and making sure that retailers have all sort of interfaces at the store to connect with, especially the millennials, that require also a lot of cabling. IP cameras is big in all the sectors. We're going to name specifically retail and college campuses and education and facilities for all sort of safety and security concern reasons. Also cabling for digital signage, especially the end of aisle signage. You might be witnessing it in some of the convenience stores and the product ads in grocery. These are some trending activities in digital signage that are requiring cabling. Cabling for network equipment. All the work that is happening in these large facilities require reconfiguration of networking to handle all this infrastructure. Also for cost effectiveness, as in installing new IDFs or reconfiguring these IDFs or installing software-defined networks. These all require cabling work, and we're going to go in more details into this. And also cabling for end-user computing and VoIP, even though it's not been as growing as the rest of these use cases recently, especially that end-user computing has been taking a little bit of a back seat as the market has been saturated since COVID. And then structured cabling is the backbone on which all this really hinges, and especially data centers, large warehouses, DCs, and big box retail. We're privileged to have cabling experts here in our customers, in our customer LMI and strategic partner, and I'd love to pick your brains on which of these use cases that you see at your end really growing and thriving.
Yes, thank you for the introduction, Will. From LMI perspective, we're seeing growth across the board in each one of these categories, but primarily the one that's leading is wireless. Wi-Fi has been growing exponentially over the past couple of years. Now that we are coming out of the COVID recession and there are more new stores coming in, you are seeing Wi-Fi being offered at more and more facilities around the country. And it's an oxymoron. We all know that every wireless access point requires a wire. So yeah, we are seeing a huge growth. We're also seeing a growth in the type of Wi-Fi cabling, right? So it used to be a Cat 5 to Cat 5e. Now we are seeing where Cat 6a and even Cat 7, multiple cables required for each type of installation. So we are seeing extreme growth in the wireless access points.
Oh, thank you for this insight, Thomas. So you're saying that each wireless access point, the refreshes that are happening in a way where they require two cables attached to it.
Yeah, it just depends on the customer, but yeah, there are plenty of applications out there where it is a requirement now, where we are being required to install two cables to each access point.
Awesome. One of the trends that we've been seeing at our end that I would love to hear from you about is also the technology push that is coming from the manufacturers to bring in more cost effectiveness and more square foot utilization using power over Ethernet. Is that something that you're seeing at your end, and where is it taking shape the most, or is it growing the most?
Good question. I would say from a PoE perspective and the different various devices, from what we're seeing is in the cellular space, as far as the cabling or PoE requirements for there, cradle point installs going out where we're looking to install our customers are looking to install a cellular backup in case anything happens to their wired connection. They are have the ability to continue to do business without any interruption. So we are seeing a huge increase across the board in the cellular space as it pertains to PoE.
Awesome, thank you. And another key major driver that we want to really put some emphasis on is all these devices now are working in a way where they are like thin clients. They don't require the in-premise storage that they used to require in the past. So where all this storage goes, it goes into data centers. And this is what we're just about to talk about, is that there is growth for data centers across the country. A lot of growth, whether that is hyperscale data centers, the big ones, or the mid-sized data centers, or the small ones. There is growth in data centers. This chart is from McKinsey, where they are expecting that the growth of data centers is going to continue at 10% compound annual growth rate, which is a lot, all the way through 2030. And this is happening because of three key drivers. Again, most of these devices that you're seeing everywhere are thin devices. They're not designed to keep the data in store or in premise. They're designed to send the data in an integrated way, excuse me, to the cloud. So where is the cloud? Cloud is in data centers. The other key driver is the massive growth of data and rich media that happened, especially with the trend of working from home, and even with a device, so many devices in everybody's hand, and the IoT. This really transmits rich media over the internet, and this all gets eventually stored in data centers, and this requires massive storage. So data centers again are growing significantly, and also cloud migrations, whether that is for companies that used to keep their data in premise and require cloud migrations, or for companies that want to arrive at some kind of a hybrid configuration, you name it. Data centers are not only here to stay, they're here to grow significantly at 10% compound annual growth rate forecast through 2030. And they are a key driver for the growth of fiber. So if you do work at data centers, and if you are one of those companies that do work in building new data centers, establishing or working on establishing the network infrastructure and the cable infrastructure for them, especially fiber, you're really in luck. This is an area of massive growth. Another area of massive growth is what we talked about earlier, which is really security. The market has seen massive growth in security, the need for security over the last 2 to 3 years because of so many different safety and security concerns across the different sectors in the market. I just talked about two major sectors that are facing some issues with safety and security. One of them is education for sure, and we're aware about that. Campuses in colleges and education facilities are equipping all their facilities with access control systems, with IP cameras for surveillance. Another key sector is retail. You might be witnessing some or seeing some retailers announcing issues with losses happening because of inventory shrinkage and theft, store theft. So retail is getting so active in installing surveillance and access control systems as well. And there is also a technology push coming from OEMs, where OEMs are packaging the surveillance with a SaaS kind of deal. They're even calling it VSaaS, or video surveillance as a service, where they're not only packaging the devices in a way where they can be leased or rented, but they're also packaging it with all sort of analytics to go back to the stores and sell them on shopping analytics and consumer analytics that can be of a lot of help to them. So this is becoming really very key trend that is driving the need for significant amount of cabling refreshes and cabling in general. And again, our experts here, LMI, is this something that you're seeing also, or what's your experience with this? Michael, you're on mute.
Excuse me, I was muted. Yes, I'll take this one. Yeah, as you alluded to, while it's a combination of integration and affordability, right? So previously, access control, security, and analytics would all be three separate systems, more than likely three separate companies coming in and installing that for you. You may get lucky and those systems do communicate and play nice together, but oftentimes they did not. Right, so nowadays it's kind of a one-stop shop. One company is offering all of those as a suite package, and the way it's integrated makes it very simple to use. The costs are all cut down. There's no longer a need for an NVR, a network video recorder, or a digital video recorder on site for a security system, because everything is cloud-based, right? It's backing up video in real time to the cloud. So they have offloaded that equipment as well. So all of that is combined to drop the price down and make this an affordable solution for small retail shops, small offices, where before it was only big box retail and corporate level, enterprise level solutions, right? So now you can get that enterprise solution down to a simple small retailer, and it is something that's cost effective these days. So we've seen a huge uptick in this.
Thanks, Michael. We've seen the same uptake, and one of the things that we want to show in the next slide is really the amount of massive growth that particularly we saw in security from pre-COVID to post-COVID. So here we're comparing the growth on the platform, on the spend on the platform for the security categories, and particularly we're talking about several categories here, including access control systems, including IP cameras and surveillance, including RFID-based security in retail, including burglar alarm. We're witnessing a lot of growth on these areas from a security category standpoint. It is the fastest growing category on Field Nation, and again, it's because of the security concerns that we're talking about. Security is really one of the areas that if you're in, you're really fortunate because the projects that are coming in are massive and frequent, and they require a lot of cabling. We're going to talk a little bit more about these categories soon, but to focus again on security particularly, on the next slide, one of the things that I would like to share with you is also another driver that is massive growth for cabling. And I know, Michael and Thomas, you forgot about cellular trends more than I learned. So share with us, why do you think this is an area of fast growth?
I'll take this one, Well. So you were talking about the cellular trends and the increased growth there, right? So there has been like a huge uptick, and I think customers are seeing the value in, if something happens to your primary wired circuit, you have an easy option to come in and keep your network up and running with very minimal downtime. That's a nice failover. We are seeing it not as a primary. I mean, there are some applications where it is the primary circuit, but in most cases, the cellular cradle point usage is for a backup circuit that allows the customer to keep their business up and functional with minimal downtime. We are seeing it across the board. It's going into large retail, to grocery stores, to the financial sector and bank locations. We are seeing a huge uptick across the whole market in the cradle point space.
Very interesting. So any insight, Thomas, on why do you think this is happening? Is there like a key reason why this is a fast growth project type?
Yeah, I think it's just a more cost-effective backup solution, right? I had one customer that talked about the tens of millions spread out over all their locations that they're saving, and it also gives them the assurance that they have another path other than a wired circuit coming in. So redundancy along with the cost-effective, we're just seeing it across the board.
Awesome. Another area that also we might need your insight into is what we're seeing at our end here from a data perspective. Very fast growth of software-defined networks or WANs in general, SD-WANs and ISDNs, as well as POTS conversions. And I read a lot about POTS, but I could definitely use your insight into why this seems to be always coming back, even though there is a back and forth as to the regulation deadline with it. It keeps coming back, and it's an area of growth again. So both SD-WANs, ISDNs, and POTS, do you see growth with them, and what is the impetus? Why is that happening?
Yeah, from our perspective, the POTS in a box solution that we are seeing more and more of comes down to being cost effective too, where customers are paying for the individual phone line now, just like it comes in to your old house, just a plain old telephone line. We are seeing that the cost savings can be upwards of 50% by just converting all of those POTS lines into a POTS in a box device that brings them all into one, and it is really just a cost savings across the board. It's not that POTS is making a comeback, it's that POTS is just now being converted into another device that will allow them to do their job or have those phone lines at a much lower cost.
The costs. One of the use cases that we're seeing at our end, which is very interesting, is that some of these alarms in some cases are analog, and for all the security concerns, you wouldn't be waiting for the system to be disconnected from the fire department or from the government facility that it should call, and in order to digitize it, you need that POTS in a box kind of conversion. It's a very interesting use case that we see at our end.
That's correct. We're seeing the same thing, and that is the driving factor or one of the reasons or benefits of the whole POTS in a box solution. And
then there is this entire area of software-defined WANs and networks. Is this an area that you see also driving need for network infrastructure and cabling, and how so?
I'd say, of course, I mean, the more network devices that any end user is going to have, all requires a wire, right? So anything in the telecommunications, it's really just connecting the dots, point A to point B, and just making sure that the wire that you have is just correct on both ends. We're seeing an increase in the cabling space, network, as far as network equipment goes, absolutely. Again, I think it's just technology is constantly evolving, right? There is always something new that is being added. That's what's great about our industry. Every year you're getting, or every 5 years, you're getting to go back to a customer that you've always had and doing an upgrade on the existing equipment that they have. New features are coming out every day, so everybody wants the latest and greatest. It's like when the new Apple phone comes out, everybody's waiting in line. But same thing with technology. It's no different in the communication space.
Which is amazing, for sure. And so to sum this up, would like to share with you what we have been seeing on the platform from a spend standpoint, like the spend, not the volume, the spend on the platform, and how different technology categories have been growing over the last 3 to 4 years. And the reason why we want to look at it this way is to get a sense of the trajectory. And I'll explain to you why. So when you look at the navy bar, this is basically comparing 2022 with 2019 from a spend growth standpoint. Why do we want to compare 2022 with 2019? Because that's comparing post-COVID with the world pre-COVID, post-pandemic and pre-pandemic. Why wouldn't we compare it with 2020? Well, you guessed it. 2020 is very anomalous year. It was full of data anomalies. There was ups and downs that, the market hit rock bottom during April, and it recovered very slowly. So it does not really mimic a good or represent a good denominator to compare against. So we're comparing the data on the spend on the platform from 2022 to 2019 to get a sense of how technology categories grew post-pandemic versus pre-pandemic. And that navy bar here represents that. So looking at security category, for example, and that is IP cameras, surveillance, IP camera surveillance, access control, and burglar alarms, and it's 150% plus. The blue bar in the middle is comparing 2022 with 2021, so year-over-year growth. And then the gray bar, or this blue bar, is to compare the trailing 12 months, which is May to the last May, to the 12 months before that, May 22 and to May 21. So the last 12 months to the 12 months before that. The reason we do that is that we want to get a feeling of what is the trajectory of different technologies. And so, for example, you can see that over 3 years, security has grown massively, okay? And then it's also growing even more as a trajectory in general, because comparing 2021 growth versus the trailing 12 months growth, the trailing 12 months is even increasing as a trajectory. So security in general is increasing. Now, that is not the same thing for networking and cabling, because over the first couple of quarters in the year, Q1 and Q2, which we have not finished yet, we have seen deferrals of some of the projects happening at retail. Retail is deferring some of the projects because of uncertainty in the market, volatility in the market. That doesn't mean that they've deferred everything, because you can see there is still like 27 to 28% growth, which is very healthy, but it's not the same 40% growth that we've witnessed in 2022. And that is, again, that little slow attrition is because of the deferral of a lot of projects, or some projects, because of holding back capital expenses or capital investments, because of the worriness about the market conditions. Is going to go into recession? Is it not? Also, the American consumer held a little bit back to an extent. We've seen, those of you that are following the retail sales, you're going to see that in January it was really exceeded the expectations, but in February it started coming back down because of American consumer being a little bit worried about the market conditions. So retail is holding back on some of the capital expenses, and this is making the CapEx work, the CapEx budget allocations that go into infrastructure work, hold back a little bit, but not completely. And again, remember, there are segments that thrive during even any of these scenarios. But then compare that to an area that is actually taking the back seat now, like end user computing, which is actually slowing down significantly. And that is because there is a lot of market saturation that happened during COVID. The market received a lot of shipments during COVID, and now the OEMs are not shipping this at the same magnitude that they used to during COVID. So that market saturation is causing less rollouts, less maintenance, and consecutively less volume and less spend from an end user computing. Now, the good news is that what's making up for it is point of sale. Point of sale is increasing because a lot of upgrades happening for near field communication chips and mobile point of sale and self-checkouts. So point of sale is really picking up the pace because of store openings and remodels, and because of near field communication upgrades. Some categories are thriving, some categories are waiting and monitoring and seeing the market until retail and other segments take a look at the recessionary scenario and get over it. And remember, you need to closely follow retail and see what the expectations are for the holiday season, because good expectations for holiday season mean that retail will put some CapEx allocations again, which will kick back some of that spend. So before we move into talking about labor, one of the things that would love to bring to you is we closely take a look at the search activity in the market, whether that is on Google or on even on our platform. The search activity in the market, massive increase in structured cabling contractors, 320% increase in search volume in the last 3 months, and up 50% year over year. So there is still a lot of activity happening in structured cabling. That 28% is not a small increase; it's still a massive increase. And also a lot of search for fiber optic technicians is up 60% in the last 3 months, and up 82% year over year. So the search activity is still happening for cabling technicians. That's still not going anywhere. It's still happening. We're comparing that slowiness, comparing it to 2022 and massive growth in 2021. But that's just like relative slowdown. But that slowdown does not mean that the activity has gone away. It's still really in a great shape in the market. So what do you do about it? If there's growth potential in the market and areas that you can capitalize on, but there is some labor crisis. So we're gonna go through some of the characteristics of that. So 3 key things that we monitor is the job openings to hire ratio, which has been around 1.6. That means for every job 1.6 job openings, there is 1 hire. And that is not like a great ratio, because the ratio that you want to see is getting closer to 1, which means that the job market is still tight, especially when you compare it to 9.9 million open jobs. So that market is very thirsty for jobs. And the quit rates are not helping that. 2.6 quit rates compared to 2.2 baseline before the pandemic. So that the voluntary quit rates mean that labor still have some alternatives, especially the skilled labor. Skilled labor still have alternatives. And so in the next slide, that is also very evident in the growth, or basically the quit data monthly. We're seeing that continues to grow. More voluntary quits are happening, and these voluntary quits are basically happening for two reasons. There is early retirement, and also there are options in the market. So that 9.9 million open jobs are offering opportunity, and some of it for skilled labor, and that percentage for skilled labor open up the opportunity for labor to quit. And so for as long as these quit rates are high, there will continue to be tightness in the market. Another key drivers that are driving this tightness is the demographic is changing. So the workforce is aging. There is an aging workforce. 48%, according to Service Council, in the next slide, Sarah. 48% of field service engineers are over the age of 45. So these are going into early retirement, and with them are going their expertise. And replacing them requires a lot of onboarding time, a lot of training, and it's really not helping the situation. So basically, and this also met with tighter or decline in vocational enrollment in schools. The millennials are not opting in for doing field services work. So this market is getting to a point where demographic is aging. Voluntary quits are happening, early retirement is happening, and then the fresh coming in generation is not really opting into field services, and this is not helping the picture by any means. And the supply is really tight if you look at it from this angle. But if you look at it, and I'm going to move to this is just like some data to project it to the fiber and the telecom industries to talk about the open jobs that are there, and the massive opportunity. 1.6 million miles of fiber over the next 5 years need to be run. I'm trying to learn the right terminology. They need to be run, they need to be extended. Telecom as well is in need to 250,000 new technicians, and the market is tight on those. There is definitely tight supply, and the labor market is still very tight. Structurally, there is a structural deficit there. And if you look at it from a different angle, which is where is this labor going that voluntarily quit over the last 18 months, especially in the wake of COVID? One thing that happened is if you are tracking the percentage of savings in the hands of the American households, you'll see a massive increase during COVID, and this increase is beginning to dry out a little bit. So what happened is that, again, in the US, we poured $2.3 trillion of stimuli money in the hands of people, and this definitely resulted in the appetite for early retirement. But then these savings are beginning to dry out a little bit more. So there is an appetite that we're seeing from those that did that early retirement to come back and do more flexible work. So our friends at MDO Partners see that the full-time independent workers have increased from 38.2 million in 2020 to 64.6 million in 2022. This significant increase of independent workforce happened because a lot of workforce quit the fixed schedule type of work and want to take on work that they only need. And honestly, also anecdotally, we're hearing from a lot of the providers that came to our platform is that many of them are coming to the platform not only to do independent work or flexible schedule work, but to show up as businesses. This is one major trend that is happening with field services. Technicians, as they grow up, they like to show up as businesses. They see a lot of opportunity, like when we're talking about all this opportunity, cabling, security, data centers, what have you. These technicians are capable of doing this work for more money. And they think that if they show up as independent businesses, they will be able to do a lot more money than showing up as W-2s. So the other argument or angle of viewing things is that this tight supply in the market is tight, especially in the fixed workforce. But when it comes to the flexible workforce, the on-demand workforce, we're seeing a different viewpoint. We're seeing massive increase in the number of signups every week. So more after COVID, particularly over the last 12 months, 20% increase in the signups, the weekly signups into Field Nation platform. And when we interview these signups, many of them are those that did that early retirement or quitting, want to handle more flexible schedules, and many of them also want to show up as their own independent businesses. They think they can make a lot more money than when they were W-2s, and they are far more experienced when they do that. And then, as I mentioned earlier, these retirees are quietly returning to the workforce. Some because of the drying out of the savings that happened during COVID and that massive stimuli packages that happened during that time. But also some of it is happening because many of them think that they can make a lot more money when they're flexible, manage their own schedules, and show up as businesses to make more money with that. 57%, a key metric here, 57% of the retirees want to continue working in some form. That is from T. Rowe Price. And this is because they want to come back because they're not fully feeling that they can fully rely on these savings. These savings are dying out and the money is losing its value because of inflation. But also it's difficult transition to completely stop working. They'd like to come back and do some work in some caliber. That 20% increase that I've been talking about earlier, if you project it to skilled cabling, interestingly, when we started monitoring this very closely on the platform in 2015, we had somewhere close to 2,100, 2,200 skilled cabling technicians. That went all the way to 8,000 before COVID. It dropped during COVID because of the activity in the entire market dropped significantly in 2020. That's what I was talking about. And started to uptick, and now it is at a level of around 21% increase in the number of skilled cabling technicians that can do that skilled cabling work. And when we take a look at where we earned or where we gained this increase, it's mainly from W-2s that want to come to an on-demand platform like Field Nation and show up like businesses and earn more money on a flexible schedule. So with that,
All right.
I'll
Thanks,
turn it back to
Lionel.
Sarah.
Thank you. All right, so we do have one more poll before I hand the mics over back to YL and LMI. I do have one question for you before they give you some business recommendations. So the question here is just popped up in front of you. It says, what's blocking your cabling project growth the most today? We are running a little bit shorter on time, so we aren't going to analyze these results live either. We want to make sure that we get to our next section here, but please let us know your thoughts, and we'll be sure to share this, the results back with you after the webinar.
Thank you, Sarah. So after all this, you'd be wondering what kind of recommendations can we make? We will make these recommendations based on multitude of things, but perhaps the most important two major or three major trends that bake these recommendations are: number one, the volatility in the market, and number two, the tightness of the supply. But number three, the still existing opportunity to capitalize on, especially as it relates to these new store openings, remodels, and logistics facilities, and all these opportunities that require you to take advantage of and quickly be able to respond to market opportunity. And in order to quickly respond to market opportunity, hedge against volatility, really variabilize your P&L. A fixed P&L will not help. If there is a lot of penetration of fixed P&L and fixed labor in that P&L, it does not help you respond quickly to market opportunity, because the response to market opportunity requires flexibly available strategic labor out there for you to be able to fulfill with. Not only that, hedging against volatility requires variable P&L, and every industry and their sister, as we say, have variabilized their P&Ls. So you look at the airline industry; they're no longer buying their own aircraft. They're leasing these aircraft from the Airbuses and the Boeings. Even retail, like if you look at retail, the items that we see on the shelves are not completely purchased until they sell. So retailers get the vendors to manage the inventory on the shelves, replenish and fill the shelves, and whatever sells, they pay the vendors for. So every industry is trying to variabilize its P&L, and it's very important in this ups and downs, in this volatile kind of environment, to variabilize as much as you can of your P&L. Another area is beat that structural supply deficit. If there is a structural supply deficit today, it's not going to go away very soon. It's probably going to take all the way to 2024 to start seeing some ease of this tightness. And in order to beat that tightness, there is an on-demand labor for you to extend to, and that will enable you to also respond to market opportunity without having to be tightly held back by this structural deficit in the supply market, labor market. And then take control over your outcomes. Definitely you need to have your network of vendors, but sometimes this network of vendors is very tough to manage when it comes to taking control over the budget, taking control over the variability of the budget and the variability of the prices, and being able to go back and adjust prices to your customer, especially in the light of inflation, and also taking control over the quality outcomes. For that all, if you rely on a percentage of on-demand labor, that also gives you back, especially the direct to contractor model, a lot of control over your outcomes and over your budget. That you will find very favorable during these market conditions. So one of the things I want to finish with is now bringing it all together as to, we talked a lot about the market trends from a cabling standpoint, but what are some of the specific use cases that are happening on Field Nation platform? I'll go through them quickly, and would love to get the perspective of our friends at LMI as well, as to which areas they hold near and dear and see a lot of growth within. So these use cases, we will segment them into standard use cases, intermediate use cases, and complex use cases. That's when it comes to the supply and the coordination complexity required from them. Some standard use cases like cabling for equipment installations, and these are typically retail equipment, point of sale, self-checkout, end user computing, and also cabling for network equipment, such as routers, switches, rack and stack, bridges, cabling for wireless equipment, and then there is the entire area of cabling for IP cameras, IP devices, and AV. We see these happening all the time, and they're ubiquitous, and they do require skilled technicians for sure. But the next level is a little bit more skilled and require more skilled technicians and more capable technicians of dealing with more complex environments. And that is the intermediate segments, and that is the copper structure cabling in commercial buildings and the fiber. In the next slide, Sarah. And then the last but not least, the most complex one is the one that takes place in the copper and fiber, both in big box retail, large warehouses, and large logistics facilities, both fiber and copper. And we see that in data centers as well. And we see that fiber is the real and the main growing technology there. Our friends at LMI, which of these use cases do you see big in the next 18 months?
Sure, I'll take this one, Lyle. We are, obviously with all the security increase, right? So that is mostly a copper structured cabling. But with that, there always is potential for fiber as well. We're definitely seeing a bigger push in national small retail, right? So your national chains that have a small store are absolutely exploding in business, right? They all are getting security updates. They are all getting Wi-Fi updates, and most of them are migrating all their existing cable to either 6A or 7, Cat 6A or 7. So I think that's where we're seeing the biggest push is from these national retail chains. And honestly, there's been a glut of network refreshes that weren't completed during COVID. Everybody kind of had a freeze, right? So we had about 2 years where these refreshes were not being done, and they typically happen every 4 to 6 years. So we had 2 years of no network refreshes, and I think that's where we're seeing a major push is people are finally ready to start spending that money again and get these networks refreshed. So we're seeing a huge push in retail.
Awesome, great. Well, thank you. Back to you, Sarah.
All right, and I do have one more question for either Thomas or Michael. What part has Field Nation played in your ability to be successful in the cabling space?
Sure, I'll keep talking. Why not? It's played a huge role in us. It's been instrumental in stretching our reach, right, and getting those hard to reach locations. Our national footprint has grown. Our ability and time frame to find local resources has gotten better and better, and it's opened up opportunities for us that we didn't have previously. It's been huge.
That's great. And what has the supply been like in the last few years? Is there anything you've noticed about the supply of cabling technicians on Field Nation?
Sure, I think it's increased. I think there's been a massive increase in number of technicians over the last 3 to 4 years. Obviously, it looks like they're chasing all the work that's out there that we're seeing, right? We're seeing an increase in the work. That's pretty much how it flows. With that increase, you're seeing a lot more technicians on the platform. Overall, I would say they're on a whole more experienced than in the past. So that's encouraging as well.
That's great. All right. I know we don't have much time for our open Q&A here, but I will ask Thomas one more question that we got from the audience, and that is, how do you really keep and maintain those lasting relationships with your end clients?
Yeah, I think this goes way back to the early days. Every customer is the most important thing that you've got going on at that particular time. There's no customer that's too small to get your full attention. That small customer is what leads you to the next large opportunity. It's just a matter of putting them first, no matter the size of the organization.
Well, that's great. And I know we're at time here, so I just wanted to thank all our panelists and all the attendees for joining us today. To all of you who stand up that cabling infrastructure work in the US, I just wanted to personally say thank you. You support everything that allows us to stay connected as a society. And if you haven't been given enough credit lately, I'm giving it to you now. So thank you. And, please let us know anything that we can do to support you and your cabling endeavors. Thank you so much for joining us.